Hey friends, this is Gavin Hardkiss from Hardkiss Music in San Francisco, and you're listening to the Liverpool Connection podcast.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Liverpool Connection podcast. I'm your host Dazza. I've got James Pearce from The Athletic back on the pod to talk everything Liverpool. He was just over in the States for the US tour, a very hot tour that I've been told. A couple of the lads from the podcast went to South Carolina and said it was very hot and it chucked it down. But James, welcome to the pod again. It's been a while.
Hi, Dad. You okay?
I'm good, mate. So the US tour for you, how was it this time?
Yeah, it was good. Yeah. I think it's always great going over to the States with Liverpool because I think I've seen over the years the kind of the passion and fervor for Liverpool over there just grow and grow. So I think my first tour over there in the States with Liverpool would have been 2012 when Brendan Rodgers had just taken over, and to see what was it, 42,000 I think it was in Pittsburgh for the Real Betis game, and then what was it, 70 and then nearly 80,000 for the games against Arsenal and Man United. Incredible, really. Slightly surreal sight of Liverpool and Man United fans sharing a fan park, and you think, I'm not sure that'll catch on in the northwest of England, but yeah, it was great, and I think most importantly, it was really beneficial from a football point of view because obviously it's always a balancing act with those tours in terms of clearly there's a commercial kind of importance to them. Especially the fact that I think over 50% of Liverpool's commercial partners are based in the States. So it's become a real kind of target market for Liverpool's commercial team. But I think also, the feedback from Slot and his staff were that the facilities were brilliant from a football point of view. And yes, it wasn't ideal, the fact that lots of his main players were still on their holidays after the Euros and the Copa America. But he was able to get a lot done with the players he did have available to him. And I think anyone that watched the friendlies would have come away thinking, yeah, I can see that this guy has already put his stamp on this squad, because it's not a big change stylistically from Klopp, but there's some pretty distinct differences. And really, really positive. And I suppose the other big one was, which made a lovely change compared to some tours I've been on, was no injuries. How many times in recent years have we kind of said, they were dropping like flies during pre-season, and I think there was just that one scare, wasn't there, about Curtis Jones, but then even he, a couple of days later was back out on the pitch again. So yeah, there was a lot of positives to come out of it.
I mean, obviously this is the first tour in a long time without Klopp at the helm. Have you actually been able to sit down with Slot yet?
Not properly. No. I was hoping it might have happened on the tour, but no, that opportunity didn't arise itself. I think he was pretty clear that he just wanted to focus solely on, training the players and getting to grips with the job he's taken on. And he, the feedback I had was that he kind of felt that, he didn't really have much else to add to kind of what he'd said at his unveiling, and that it was still such early days that he would rather just keep a low profile, because he didn't really do much media at all over there. I think he the only pre-match press conference he did was in Pittsburgh, and then he did post-match in Pittsburgh, and then didn't do pre-match at all before Arsenal Man United. Just did a press conference after the game against Arsenal. And then I was one of, I think, 5 UK reporters who were over there covering Liverpool, and he gave us a few minutes of his time after the final game against Man United before Liverpool headed to the airport and back to the UK. So shame in a way, because I think it would have been nice to have had a proper kind of sit down. And sometimes on those trips, I think back to when Brendan Rodgers took over in 2012, probably had 45 minutes to an hour in the team hotel, just more than anything else, just getting to kind of know each other, really. But that opportunity hasn't arisen quite yet.
Do you think it's more so, because massive boots to fill, obviously, with Klopp leaving? Do you think it's just more like he wants to get his head down and just get on with the job?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah. I don't think there was anything else to it than exactly that. I think he just thinks to himself, well, I've been brought in to develop this group of players to win games and to come up with a strategy to overcome each opponent that we find in our path. And the other side of it, clearly, in terms of maybe, articulating his message, if you like, he probably felt, well, I don't feel as if I need to do that at the moment. And of course, he'll be judged on how Liverpool perform out on the grass rather than anything he says to the media. So yeah, I thought it was interesting that the little media he did do over there. He was always very keen. If you asked him about any particular player, he was always very keen to bring the conversation back to the group as a whole, the squad, and it's. I think clearly he wants to. It's that. I guess that sense of kind of not wanting to make it look as if he regards anyone as more important than anyone else, that everyone is on an equal footing. It's a clean slate for absolutely everyone, and it's down to them to kind of force their way into his plans. So yeah, I think certainly it was fascinating watching him take training. We were able to watch training a couple of times, and especially with the open session that they did in Philadelphia. He's really hands-on, certainly a lot more hands-on, I'd say, than Klopp, who was always out there. Of course, he wasn't feet up in the office, but he did tend to kind of let Pep Linders lead the way in terms of the training program. Where Slot, yes, there were drills overseen by other members of his staff, but he, when he felt that things weren't quite the message wasn't getting through, or players weren't doing exactly as he hoped they would, he was straight on there. He had a whistle in his hand and was stopping things, and then demanding the ball himself, and kind of showing the players exactly what he wanted to see. And I suppose the other intriguing thing was they worked loads on you kind of working the ball through 1-2s out wide and then drilling crosses along the 6-yard box. And then I think it was I think it was one of the goals against United was very similar to that, and even against Sevilla as well. You saw kind of some of that link up play out wide between the fullbacks and the wide attackers. It's I think there was a lot of signs of kind of like, oh yeah, that what they worked on is kind of really starting to come to fruition.
Now, not only are you a journalist and writer, but you are a Liverpool supporter. Now, obviously with zero signings, well, apart from we'll speak about the goalkeeper in a minute, but you feel a sense of frustration coming from the supporters because, obviously you go on Twitter, Twitter's very toxic. It's seeping down to Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. People are getting more and more frustrated with, obviously, the owners. They want the owners to spend more money. What are you seeing? Because you're down on the ground. What are you seeing? What are you hearing from everyone?
Yeah, I think it's definitely fair to say there's a fair degree of frustration amongst the fan base, and not just amongst the ones who always moan loudest on Twitter or on social media as a whole. I think I think obviously every summer you kind of look upon it as a chance to enhance what you've got and strengthening key areas, and I never ever thought that it would be a busy summer for Liverpool. I remember writing in May that it would be a case of fine tuning rather than an overhaul for Slot. And of course you get the usual trolls on social media saying, what are you on about? We need 5 or 6. You're talking nonsense. You don't know anything. And it's like, it was so obvious it was never going to be a busy window for Liverpool. Because when you looked at the squad Klopp left behind, usually when you take over at a big club after an iconic name like that, is because things have gone awry. It's very rare for someone to take over when a team has just finished in the Champions League qualifying places and won a trophy, as Liverpool did last season. So yeah, I don't anyone who was expecting big kind of Chelsea-like shopping sprees this summer, then they were living in cloud cuckoo land. But I think most kind of normal supporters that I know, and I share their frustrations, they kind of thought we've got to sign a holding midfielder because I think Endo did a decent enough job last season, but he was always only ever going to be a stopgap signing. And then I think over the course of preseason, that kind of feeling, certainly for me, cemented, because it was like, oh, actually, it's now a much more possession-based approach, more patient at times. You need a real ball player in that role. And with the greatest respect to Endo, that's not his strength. So I think, like a lot of people, I was waiting for Liverpool to make the move. I always thought a holding midfielder would be the priority, and I think we saw that with obviously earlier on this week, the pursuit of Martin Zubimendi, and I think that's the shame, because I think if that deal had been done, then the mood would be so different. It's just one player, but everyone would be on a high. Everyone would be saying, you know what, the one big issue that hadn't been resolved has now been resolved. We've managed to get this player, absolutely elite. It was a Euro winner with Spain a couple of months ago. It previously turned down Bayern and Barcelona and Arsenal. What a coup that would have been for Liverpool. And the frustration is that Liverpool thought they had the deal done. They were told by the player that he wanted it to happen. I think we all know these days that the days of kind of like club to club agreeing a deal and then asking the player who fancies it just doesn't happen. You don't make a move unless you've had some strong indications the player wants to move. But it then got a bit messy because Sociedad made it very clear that they didn't want to sell him. That their hands were tied to a certain degree because he had this buyout clause of about £51 million, but they weren't going to let him leave kind of with everyone shaking hands and everyone wishing each other all the best, and which obviously sometimes happens because the selling club want the money. That wasn't the case with Sociedad. They basically said, you're going to have to be forcing the issue. And clearly when you're a homegrown hero from a Basque club, that's a big deal. To actually be seen and be portrayed, as the one, you're almost trying to force your way out of the club. And I think once it dragged on over the weekend, I started to get, thinking, something's not quite right here. Why is it taking so long? And then obviously on Monday, the worst fears were realised when he told Liverpool, I've changed my mind and I'm staying put. So yeah, the lack of signings is a concern for me, because I think also just it creates this kind of like noise and negativity where there is actually a lot to be positive about. It gets lost because there's this modern obsession with transfers and something shiny and new. Slaughter's got a really, really good squad. It didn't need much doing to it this summer, but for my opinion, it needed something doing to it, and in particular, it needs a new number 6.
Well, I think the frustration's growing because there doesn't seem to be a plan B. It just seems to be like Zubimendi or bust, and I think that's what's the frustrating part. We should be talking about how well pre-season went. We should be talking about the Ipswich game that's coming up on Saturday, but we're here discussing these transfers that haven't happened. And I think that's where the frustration grows, is we never seem to have a plan B, and I think that's what pisses people off the most. Do you think we will get a 6 in, or are we gonna rely on Grav, Jones, Endo? I mean, and there was talk like that Slot had come in, had seen Endo, and then he was like, nah, he's not for me, which I didn't really see that. I just, because if they wanted him gone, Marseille put in a bid, I think he would be gone. I just think, Endo being the player he is, also came out in the summer and said, I wouldn't mind competition. I love that from a player. He isn't scared of competition, but, he is going on 31. He is, slower than what you would like in midfield. But I think he does the job. Does he do the job for 38 games? No. Do you think we'll go back in, or do you think, Slot's just gone, all right, we'll shut up shop. We have the players that can do the job.
Yeah, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Liverpool won't pursue someone else. I just think from the people I've spoken to since the Zubimendi deal fell through, they've kind of said, don't assume that there will be an alternative, because at the moment there isn't a plan B. We don't think there is anyone available on the market who fits the right profile. They said, the big thing with Zubimendi was we were told he became available and he really fitted the profile of what the manager wants in a number six, because he doesn't want, I think sometimes we think about a number six being like, a destroyer type player who, goes around putting his foot in and all the rest of it. I think the skill set that Slot wants is very much like a ball playing number six. And that is why kind of Zubimendi ticked all the boxes for Liverpool. So yeah, at the moment, I mean, the other thing that I think is important to bear in mind is, having missed out on a player like that, I wouldn't expect Liverpool to say, yes, we're going to pursue someone else, because once teams find out, well, if teams get onto the fact that you're desperate, then prices tend to shoot up. So, that might be part of it. I also think part of it is probably the fact that they don't think that there's a great deal of other options out there. Because that was, when they rejected that 12 million bid for Endo from Marseille, one of the reasons I was given for that was that, they just didn't think that there were the available options out there to go and replace him, aside from the fact they thought that he was undervalued at 12 million. So, and I think the thing with Endo is, he's not on massive wages. He's a fantastic professional, great to have around the place. So I think he isn't one of those players who, if you brought in someone else in his position, you would automatically just be looking to move him on, because I think keeping him around as a squad player certainly wouldn't be the worst idea. Whether anything else happens with Endo in terms of a potential exit will obviously be dictated to by who else comes in for him and what kind of fees are forthcoming. But at the minute, there's no sign of him moving on. So yeah, I mean, Liverpool won't. Well, I think what we know with Michael Edwards being back in a position of power is, what we won't see is Liverpool wait and then panic sign Arthur Melo on deadline day on a season-long loan from Juventus or something like that. It's that's just not the way that Edwards does business. You think back to his spell as sporting director, and it just didn't matter what clamour there was outside of the club. He just ignored the outside noise. He did it repeatedly. I remember when Liverpool tried to sign Ben Chilwell from Leicester and couldn't get it done. Everyone was like, well, who's the next left back they're going to sign? And they just went, well, we're just going to play James Milner at left back for a season. And then a year later, they signed Andy Robertson. You think of I remember Twitter was probably a nicer place back then than it is now. But what Twitter was like when the Van Dijk deal fell through, and it was like, no, there has to be a plan B, that you can't just not sign a centre back. And Edwards was like, no, we're not going to sign a centre back. We're gonna wait. We're gonna patch things up with Southampton, and then we'll get Van Dijk in January. So, yeah, I think if Liverpool do pursue an alternative to Zubimendi, it won't be because it'll be like, oh my God, we've got to get someone. It will be because an opportunity has presented itself that probably they didn't think was achievable, and at a price they think is represents decent value. And because and Liverpool are right in so much as they do have a lot of midfield options. They've got numbers there, but it is, for me, just not having that specialist, because Slot appears to be gravitating towards using Gravenberch as a starter. His role in pre-season grew, and of course he started against Sevilla last weekend. But I'd say the jury's out on Gravenberch. I like him. I think he's an elegant footballer, very pleasing on the eye. But physically, I think sometimes he's found wanting. and he's still got a lot to prove. So it's like, are we really kind of staking hopes of a title challenge on Gravenberch really clicking? Or is Curtis Jones going to be reinvented in that deeper role, or Szoboszlai? For me, Jones and Szoboszlai are best when they've given a bit of a license to push further on.
No, I agree with you 100%. This experimenting thing kind of worries me. It's kind of like the Trent experimenting at Euros in midfield. It obviously just didn't work, and he was kind of made the scapegoat for a while. And I just think we're going into this season, without really, apart from Endo, a number 6. Do you think Bajcetic will go out on loan? Because obviously, there's that other thing too. Why would we send him out on loan? Well, for one, he's been out more than a year playing not competitive matches. He's got the talent, but he needs the matches. And this season, he's lower down the pecking order. So, a loan would be good for him.
Yeah, and that's why I wasn't surprised at all to learn last week that they were prepared to consider loan options for him. Nothing is indefinite at this stage, but you're right, because although it's like, he did really well, didn't he? When you think the season before last, especially in a team that was falling to pieces at that time, he was like the one bright spark. But yeah, it wasn't just one season, best part of 18 months, wasn't it? He missed with, various growing pains and I don't think you can, I think sometimes people think, well, he's back. And it's like, he's back, but he's also miles, off it in terms of getting back to where he was at before, because, just the sheer intensity of the training. And even in pre-season, it was telling that he certainly wasn't involved in all the sessions I saw in the States, because I think Slot was very wary about building it up and not overburdening him and some of the other young players. I think Trey and Yoni, I think I'm right in saying, didn't feature in some sessions. So it may well be that yeah, if when Slot is listing out, right, these are my, this is my pecking order, there's not really much to be gained from keeping Bajcetic around if he's just going to play in the League Cup or be an option if Liverpool suddenly suffer some 3 or 4 injuries in midfield. You'd much rather him go out and play hopefully 30 to 35 games out on loan and hopefully get back to somewhere approaching the form he was in before the injuries. So yeah, and I think Liverpool are considering loan offers for lots of the young players at the moment, because there was so much talk, wasn't there, around them last season, especially around the Carabao Cup win over Chelsea, because so many of them played a part in that and in the victories that followed. But we've got to remember that also circumstances dictated to a large degree around that time that Klopp had to play the kids, because I think one time he had 12, 13 members of the senior squad out injured. So people like Ben Doak definitely needs to go and play regular football. Someone like Owen Beck needs to go out. Lucas Stevenson, who again has done really well in pre-season, but you think he's got Trent and Conor Bradley ahead of him. He's not going to play, so there's no point keeping these kids around and kind of stifling their development. There was a lot of, I saw there was quite a bit of pushback against Liverpool selling Fabio Carvalho, but I also think, the player wanted to play regularly, and how was that going to happen? He was one of the standout performers on the tour, but I still didn't fly back to England thinking he's going to be, a big part of Slot's team this season, because you knew that Luis Diaz and Cody Gakpo were waiting at Kirby to join the squad when the team got back. So in £27.5 million deal from Brentford for someone who cost you, I think, 5 million up front 2 years before, and he wants to go because he wants to play. That's a no-brainer, really. And then similarly, tonight I wrote the story about Bobby Clark being sold to Salzburg for £10 million. And again, I think I can understand that some Liverpool fans will go, well, hang on a minute. We were told last season that Bobby Clark was one of the most, gifted young English midfielders, and And he deserved a lot of the plaudits that came his way last season. I think he made a dozen appearances for Liverpool in all competitions. But again, you look at those players ahead of him at the moment, and and again, he wants the move. He wants to be reunited with Pep Lijnders and Vitor Matos. So what do you do? Do you keep someone who doesn't really want to be around, or do you give them what they want, as long as there's a deal on the table that suits the club? And again, £10 million for Bobby Clark, when I think, what did Liverpool pay Newcastle? £1.5 million 3 years ago. Sometimes people don't want to hear it, but that business side of it is actually important. Of course, you also want to see money spent on players coming into the club. Of course you do. But, and people will always, FSG have done some brilliant things, some bad things while they've been owners of Liverpool. But what has always stayed constant is that everything that gets generated goes back into the club. Now, it might not always go back into the club on signings. It might go back in terms of what is a pretty extortionate wage bill. It might go back into rebuilding the Anfield Road end or the new training complex or whatever else. But of course, if these young players, if the manager thinks, well, actually, you're not going to be in contention for me this season, and that young player wants to go, then if the club are making a big profit, that's just a smart business move as well.
I just think people really don't know the ins and outs of what goes on. You've got the rumours of Ben Doak not just going out on loan, but permanent sale. It is frustrating because you do watch these kids, and they were absolutely amazing last season with the Carabao Cup and the cup competitions. But we really don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know if they're knocking on the gaffer's office going, look, I don't want to go out on another loan. If you can find a club that wants me, I want to go and play football. And I think that's Carvalho in a nutshell. He said, I don't want to go on another loan. Can you find me a club that suits, what you're asking and what I want? And they found it in Brentford. So fair play to that. I am going to miss Bobby though. I like Bobby Clark a lot. I had his dad on. I had his dad on about 5 months ago, and it was just great to talk to Lee and just see his face light up talking about Bobby. But going to a place where Pep's there, he knows very well. So I'm sure, like his dad said, we might see him again at Anfield one day. But I do want to talk, before you go, about the goalkeeper situation. Obviously, Alisson has a contract until 2027. Kelleher, has said he wants to be number one, which obviously that's what you want from a player. We're bringing in somebody, Valencia. Hopefully, I get his name right. Mamad Dashvili. Is that how
I think that's definitely close enough for me.
We're bringing him in, but he's going to go on loan to Bournemouth for a year, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Do you know what? It's complicated because I know that's been touted today as the likely outcome with this, but under Premier League rules, a Premier League club can't buy a player in like that and then immediately send them out to another Premier League club. So if he is going to spend this season at Bournemouth, the way I understand it is Valencia would actually have to loan him to Bournemouth, and then Liverpool would buy him next summer. Now, I think there seems to be some confusion over this because I did a short bit on him earlier on in the week where I kind of said, yeah, Liverpool are interested, but they're not looking to recruit a goalkeeper in this window, as in they don't want a goalkeeper for this season. This is like a longer term, succession planning, if you like. So, and that is very much the case. I think people got excited today when they saw, Liverpool have open talks with Valencia, and it's like, no, this has got nothing to do with this season. This is 2025. And trying to make that deal work is something I think, Richard Hughes is trying to get to grips with, because it is complicated, because obviously then you've got a situation where if it's Valencia loaning him to Bournemouth, then what happens if he gets a bad injury at Bournemouth? Are Liverpool committed to signing him regardless next summer? What are the legalities of that? Someone said to me earlier that they thought the most likely outcome was that it made more sense for Liverpool to just let him stay at Valencia for a year. And then, almost like a kind of Naby Keita style deal when he came from Leipzig, wasn't it? When it was like, I think it was agreed in 2017 that he'll actually come in 2018. So it might be that we see that. So yeah, I think Liverpool just see it as a real opportunity for someone they think is among the top goalkeepers in Europe, is available for a relatively low fee. I think about 40 million euros that Valencia want. And I don't, I think obviously it does kind of trigger questions like, has Alisson told Liverpool that this is his last season? Now, I don't, I asked that question today and was told no, that's not the case. And I think it'd be weird if he had done, because it's quite rare that a player would be like, well, this is my last one, I'm going to move next summer. As you said, he's still got 3 years left on his contract. I think it's more the fact that probably, they wondered whether Kelleher might get bought by someone this summer. As things stand, there's been, no bids, nothing, certainly nothing anywhere near what Liverpool would want for Kelleher. But of course, come next summer, Kelleher will only have 1 year left on his deal. So if he does stay this season, come next summer, you'd imagine Liverpool would have to kind of let him go. So then, you could be bringing in Mamardashvili to effectively compete with Alisson, or if Alisson does for whatever reason decide to move on, you've already got a ready-made new number one to come in. So I don't think it's, certainly if there is like a very clear plan in terms of he's coming in, this is when he's going to become the number one, then I don't know about it. I think it's more a case of, this guy is available for what we think is a price way below his actual market value. So let's try and see if we can come up with a plan where we're able to secure his services, but with a view to him becoming a Liverpool player in 2025. Because at the moment, with Alisson, with Kelleher and Jaros, who by the way, Jaros had a really good pre-season and kind of showcased how much he's kicked on during that loan at Sturm Graz. Liverpool are very well equipped in that department at the minute.
And lastly but not least, again, I'll hark on this. You are a Liverpool supporter. Thoughts on this upcoming season?
Yeah, do you know what? It's tricky, really, because I think sometimes, especially when the window's still open, and especially off the back of something like what happened with Zubimendi, you can almost get dragged down a little bit by the kind of the negativity that inevitably follows, someone turning the club down like that. But yeah, I've got to be honest, I saw so many positive things in pre-season that I certainly don't. I don't go into the season with like a sense of trepidation or anything like that. I think, I look through the team and I think, this is a squad definitely well equipped in most departments. I think, Salah looks like a proper break in the summer's done him the world of good. Physically looks like an absolute machine. Anyone who has watched Jota in pre-season, you just think, please God, let him stay fit. If he does, he's a 30-goal a season man. Of course, the jury's still out on Darwin. We all hope that Slot can kind of probably get into his head more than anything else and try and unlock the potential there. For all the speculation about Diaz, and it feels like there hasn't been a day gone by or summer, there hasn't been some story about Diaz. And of course, there was that nonsense this week about Man City agreeing a deal to buy him. And and you were kind of, but I must admit, I never thought it was true, but until someone told me it wasn't true, I did think, oh my God, if this is true, we might as well all go home if Liverpool are selling one of their best players to them down the road. So in terms of firepower, and that's, without mentioning Gakpo, who had a brilliant Euros, and when you look at how good Kwanzaa has looked in pre-season, he'll definitely start the season ahead of Konate, exactly where he finished the last one. But there is just those nagging concerns. And I suppose, the fact that they haven't strengthened in the holding midfield role, that makes me doubt whether Liverpool can really maintain a challenge with City and Arsenal, that I think will be the two to beat again. And then I also I think it's a sense of frustration that you've got the three contract sagas still running on into the season. The fact that Van Dijk and Salah and Trent are all inside their final year, and I just, and especially from a journalistic point of view, it just becomes one of those, it's almost like a bit of a cloud over, especially if Liverpool, even if Trent scores the winner at Ipswich, it becomes like, why haven't they done it? They have to do it now, surely. Or if one of them if Mo goes 5 or 6 games without, it's suddenly become all, is that why, is that why Liverpool haven't given him a contract, because the goals aren't flowing? And is he, is he lost his way, or is he, is he unhappy because they haven't given him the new contract and all the rest of it? And so I hope that gets resolved, as a matter of priority. I certainly wouldn't apportion any kind of blame on Richard Hughes, the fact that he hasn't been able to do that yet, because I think it was a huge issue that he inherited. It should never have been allowed to get down to that point. But, especially once the window is shut, those early weeks of September, you think surely, you've got to sit down and get some clarity on these things. And the three of them are all different as well, because I think I get the impression with Salah and how relaxed he is that it probably suits him at the minute to just, I'm happy to wait and see what happens, because, I think it was telling from people attached to the Saudi Pro League that they knew they had no chance of getting him this summer, but they said, 2025 will be different. And then, I think Van Dijk, and then of course the other side of it is we don't know at the moment what these players want in terms of, say, if you're a player who's 32, 33, if you expect to have a 3 or 4 year deal on massive money, that's probably going to be problematic, especially with the way that FSG do business. I think the one that I obviously really do share the kind of, the alarm bells ringing a bit is Trent, just because of his age and his profile and his value, because the last thing, it'd be an absolute disaster to lose someone of Trent's stature, especially with his affinity to the club, being the Scouse heartbeat of the team. The idea of him going for nothing would be an absolute, just a PR nightmare for Liverpool, I think. So yeah, I really hope we get some positive news on that early on in the season, because you just don't want that becoming like an unwanted distraction. And we know what it's like, Slot will be fielding questions about it, and even though it's not his department to sort out contract renewals, he's the one that will be sitting in front of the media every week. So yeah, if I think definitely Liverpool will be top 3, and there's no reason why they can't pick up a trophy along the way. But yeah, I think to give me the belief that they can actually maintain a title challenge, then yeah, they desperately need to get another midfielder in before the end of August.
I agree with you. Well, it's been a pleasure as always, James. Good luck, for the rest of the season. Stay off. I know you can't stay off of Twitter, but you've got a pretty thick skin, because I see I see some of the comments on what you put. I'm just like, wow, if there was a scratch and sniff button or a punch button on Twitter, wow. But we just live in a different world, where people want to win the transfer trophy. And, we, again, like I said earlier, we should be talking about this Saturday, not really about transfers. Let's hope Slot starts off on the right foot. I think the first 8 games, pretty, not bad until you get to seeing Arsenal. So, we'll see where we're at in October, and then we'll see where we're at December, and then, keep it going. But I wish you all the best for the year. I'm sure I'll talk to you again before the end of the year. But cool. Thank you, everyone. Please subscribe, notifications on, and we'll see you later.
Cheers, Daz.